Well, and the game's over, just like that. What can I say about this game? Conclusion. I know my brother already finished this game and he had his own thoughts. I share his thoughts. I think that the gameplay, some of the gameplay mechanics and the game stylistics, as well as the game itself, it's a good enough game. Like, not all, you don't have that many analogies in 40k universe in terms of turn-based strategy games about Grey Knights done in that matter, where you don't have chance to hit, you have a guaranteed attacks, both you and your enemies. You have a visually well-designed foes, which were also attached to the lore, to what's going on with the modern stuff that's happening in Warhammer 40k. So in that sense, the game is good. Yeah, it has a lot of repetition-based missions, like practically like 4 or 5 over and over again, like destroy the bloom spawn spreader, kill the seed carrier, and what else? If I'm not mistaken, that's it. Oh, close the Morbus gate. You do this over and over again, and it's becoming boring after a while, but the main mission, so this is the same problem that happened in Dawn of War 2 original game. When it came out, it suffered from repetition too much, and that it was fixed in Chaos Rising DLC. Hopefully it will be the same for that game, but I have to say, like, have to give credit where credit is due. Main missions are all unique and interesting. Some of them, of course, are easier than others, some of them are harder, but at least they are the good payoff for that repetition that you have to go through when you are playing through the campaign. The lore, not the story in the game, the lore is also good. At least you get some references and callbacks to the previous events. Who is Drago, the role of the Grey Knights, the role of the Inquisition, and so on and so forth. The story of the game does not make much sense in terms of the narrative point. I mean, first of all, they already teased the final boss in one of the release trailer that it would be Mortarion, so there was no big surprise there, or like, oh, you never know who is the mastermind behind the bloom. Some people speculated that it could be Typhus, but no, like, Typhus has not even been mentioned here at all. Considering the fact that he is much more of a stronger figure in comparison to Mortarion, I was fully expecting his presence or role in some of these events. No, nothing like that. And secondly, this story in the game doesn't make that much sense. The Grey Knights, once again, they are, think of them like a special forces in, like, if you compare it to the modern world. Their role is to get to the, like, to the source of the corruption and then slay the most powerful demons. They're not gonna wage war on 3 sectors by themselves without calling any help. They're too few and far, and like their numbers are not great. The same problem to an extent was present in the Dawn of War 2 game, when only one chapter of the Blood Ravens were facing against like the Tyrannids, but at least there they received some help from the initiates of their chapter, as well as from the Imperial Guard, from the Planetary Defense Forces, and so on and so forth. But here, oh, it's like one Grey Knight Strike Force defends like 3 sectors. No, it won't. Like, you have references to Ultramarines, to the Imperial Guard, but you cannot call for help, you cannot interact with them, and to a certain extent it becomes laughable. Not only laughable, but also not achievable. Like, missions are spawning so fast you cannot cover all of the map, so it's not a good, like, well, it's not a well thought out story from my point of view. Oh, I guess it's a post-credit scene. Garden of Nurgle again. Yep.
This maggot remains, Lord Draco. Grandfather Nurgle, protect your son!
A pitiful end awaits those who serve chaos.
Wasn't his skull got crushed under the Mortarion boot?
Indeed.
Okay.
You may have cost me my stanters, but patience is the grandfather's greatest virtue. There's always another plague waiting just around the corner.
For once you speak the truth. Perhaps it is time to deploy more Proactive tactics.
Mhm.
Let them go, let them go. We must be patient. I have a great many plans for you.
Well, I guess he's going to turn that Inquisitor soul into a corrupted Chaos Spawn. So yeah, if I were to conclude all of what I've just said about this game, like, from my point of view, the most interesting part about this, it was the gameplay and gameplay features. Then it would be the visuals and aesthetics, then the lore, and then the last part is the story. Yeah, the story, I didn't like it. Like, even though I know that Dawn of War 2 only partially consider itself canon with all of its DLCs, I like its story better. With everything that happened there, I think it's outside of few elements, it's better. It's better thought out, and I enjoyed it more. But here it's like, yeah, sure, Special Forces acts as an army / protector of the 3 sectors. And yeah, and especially some elements from the story doesn't make any sense. Like, when you found Elder Craft World and you see like the 5 greater demons and they could have been easily destroyed. No, Karta actually increases their growth accidentally, and then like, oh, that's not like, we couldn't do it otherwise. Of course you can, you could have destroyed them, but then she would argue, but you couldn't find afterwards the source of the bloom, and so on and so forth. That's a far stretch. Like, that's too big of a leap, too big of a logical leap there. Same thing about Grandmaster Kai. Like, I don't understand the hatred towards that baleful edict, and everyone was on board, especially if you prove yourself over and over again by not only defeating Demon Prince, but also like trying to maintain the corruption as much as possible. In the second half of the game, he goes like penalty after penalty after penalty after penalty. Like, what's the reason? And the payback, or I guess like the benefit that you will gain after all of this is like, oh, here's some requisition points, or it's like, oh, you can choose like one advanced class, even though after this you can like select as much of an advanced class as you want as a mission reward. It doesn't make any sense. There has to be a balance between, first of all, I was thinking that all of this negative stuff that happens is going to happen not necessarily from Grandmaster Kai, which is supposed to be your ally, but from the warp itself and from the followers of Nurgle. It's like when you traveling through the world map, when you go through the Chaos Storm, like you can have a chance to get something negative. It would make more sense than like after 60 days he was like, hey, I see that you are doing great, but still, here's a debuff for you. Like, you cannot use Prognosticar. Here's another debuff for you. You cannot receive anything from Armory of the Titan. Why? Yeah, they were trying to justify it by saying, oh, Grey Knights are now in like 98 active campaigns, and they also need some some tools to dispose of the demons, as if we are not in an active campaign against 5 Demon Prince. It doesn't make any sense for me, like, because I can compare this in like negative debuff mechanics to the Darkest Dungeon. You know, a lot of people also quite despise quite heavily these Darkest Dungeon negative mechanics, but at least there, once you know how to interact with them, there are no like guaranteed factor that you will receive something negative. It's like, hey, you can avoid this, you can avoid that, and you can go through it knowing that you have done all of the right stuff, unless you are facing like some kind of a boss, and there he's just gonna do something negative against your squad. But in terms of town mechanics and something like that, the amount of debuffs in Darkest Dungeon was like way less, and they were not so penalized. I mean, can you even imagine playing, especially the debuff? Forget about prognosticars. I was playing through the game where for 60 in-game days I wasn't receiving any rewards in terms of gear at all. I was just leveling my knights and getting requisition points, but I could not spend them. They should definitely rework this system. I have nothing against the debuff as a whole, but it should be like a logical punishment for the player's action, not like, oh, you do everything right, but fuck you, here's a debuff. Like, I don't understand. Like, that's like a minor gripe that I have about the mechanics, but alas, even with that said, I still enjoy the gameplay of this game. Like I said, the gameplay, visual, audio stuff, and graphical elements, they are done great. The lore stuff, and then the one thing that I did not enjoy at all is the story. What do I wish to have or to see in the deal? Not to have. What do I wish to see in the DLC? Well, considering the post-credit, they can go in two directions. Considering post-credit scene, the DLC can also be focused on Nurgle acolytes and its followers too, as well as a bunch of demons and the death card. But please introduce Typhus. Like, get rid of the Mortarion. He's a joke in the modern lore. He's a joke in the books. Just don't remember. Like, you can have reference, but don't make him as a main antagonist. Typhus is like a much better choice here, just from my point of view. Yeah, and the same thing could be said about Cadex. Like, sure, if you want to reintroduce a corrupted version of Karta Vakir's soul, or Cadex infused with Karta Vakir's soul, you can do it, but at least make him more of a threat and not like freaking newly born demon prince with wings and propeller who barely does anything in combat. So yeah, that's the first direction. And second direction that they can go with is to create a DLC centered on the Khorne followers and Khorne God and his demons, just like you face them in the intro. That would be more of an homage / throwback to the original Chaos Gate, because in the original Chaos Gate, from what I understood, you were playing as Ultramarines chapter, and then you were facing against Khorne. So against Khornite demons. That would be great. From the Grey Knight's perspective, what I want to see, first of all, like any vehicles. I know Grey Knights don't have a lot of them, but at least introduce Dread Knights and make them powerful, because it was strange how in previous Dawn of War games, and like not even real-time strategy, even some in turn-based games, you have Dreadnoughts, and I know Grey Knights can use Dread Knights too, so introduce them, please. And yeah, I don't have anything else to say. I mean, I'll be waiting for the DLC, I think, when it will release. Not I think, I'm pretty sure I will be playing through it. But yeah, also just a thing from my, like, one thing that I want to add to this: make sure that you're working on the story more. Like, you can easily just shift the focus on like a bunch of missions in the style of special forces. Don't turn this into, oh, one ship protects like 3 sectors, because it's laughable in the context of like Grey Knights. They are not designed for this. Just saying. Regardless, I still think it's a good game. I still think that game at the end was worth the money and the time I spent it, and I will be fully, well, not fully, but eagerly expecting any additional content that would release for this game in the future.